The Great Hall of Kepler Station buzzed with quiet voices as alien representatives from across the galaxy took their seats. The massive dome above them showed the stars of a dozen different homeworlds, each light representing a species that had earned its place in the Galactic Federation. Through centuries of peaceful contact and careful diplomacy, Commander Zeke Thari stood at the center of the hall, his purple scales catching the artificial light. His four arms hung at his sides, but those who knew Velkin body language could see the slight tremor in his hands. For a warrior race that prided itself on fearlessness in battle, Zeke Thari looked remarkably shaken. The tribunal chairman, a tall, blue-skinned Altarian named High Judge Mordic, gestured for silence. The hall fell quiet immediately. Every species present knew why they were here today. The question of humanity's admission to the Federation had been debated for months, but no one could agree on what to do with these strange new beings from the third planet of the Sol system. Commander Zeke Thari, the High Judge, said in the common galactic tongue, "You have requested to speak before this tribunal regarding the human species. We understand your fleet made first contact with them 3 of their years ago. Please share your testimony." Zeke Thari's throat pouch expanded and contracted twice before he spoke. It was a nervous habit his species displayed under extreme stress. "Honored judges, I have served the Velkin military for 47 standard years. I have fought in 12 major conflicts across 6 star systems. I have led ground assaults on fortress worlds and commanded fleet actions against the most dangerous pirates in known space. Nothing in my experience prepared me for humans." A murmur rippled through the assembled aliens. The Velkins were famous throughout the galaxy as the ultimate warriors. Their shock troops were hired by peaceful species for protection. Their military academies trained officers from dozens of worlds. If a Velkin commander was afraid of something, that something was worth fearing. The first encounter seemed routine. Zeke Thari continued, his voice growing steadier as he fell into the rhythm of military reporting. "Our Deep Space Patrol detected an unknown vessel near the Proxima Centauri system. Standard protocol required us to investigate. The ship was small, perhaps 1/10 the size of our smallest destroyer. Our sensors indicated primitive technology, barely capable of faster-than-light travel." The commander paused, his large yellow eyes scanning the faces in the tribunal. "We assumed we had found another young species taking its first steps into space. Such encounters usually follow a predictable pattern. We make contact, demonstrate our superior technology, and offer guidance toward eventual Federation membership. Most species are grateful for the opportunity." High Judge Mordic leaned forward in his seat. "But the humans were different." "Yes," Zeke Thari said, and something in his voice made several tribunal members shift uncomfortably. "When we hailed their vessel, a single human appeared on our communication screen. He was unremarkable by their standards. Middle-aged, with gray hair and tired eyes. He introduced himself as Captain Jake Morrison of the research vessel New Horizon. I informed him that his ship was in violation of Velkin patrol space and must submit to boarding." The alien commander's scales darkened slightly, a sign of remembered stress. Captain Morrison listened to my demands without interruption. Then he smiled. It was not the fearful smile we usually see from primitive species when they encounter superior technology. It was the smile of someone who knows something you do not. Zeke Thari activated a holographic display in the center of the hall. The image showed a small, sleek human ship facing off against 3 massive Velkin vessels. The size difference was almost comical. The human ship looked like a tiny fish surrounded by hungry sharks. Morrison said something that I will remember until my dying day. The commander continued. He said, "Commander, you seem like a professional soldier, so I will give you one chance to withdraw. You have picked the wrong species to mess with." Several aliens in the tribunal made sounds of amusement. The idea of a primitive ship threatening Velkin destroyers seemed absurd, but Zeke Thari's expression remained grim. "I ordered my escort ships to disable the human vessel with ion cannons. Standard procedure for dealing with uncooperative primitives. The human ship should have been helpless within minutes." The holographic display began, showing the battle from multiple angles. Instead, something happened that I still do not fully understand. The human ship suddenly burst into motion, accelerating at speeds that should have killed any organic crew. It weaved between the Vulcan ships like a dancer, avoiding their weapons with impossible precision. Then it began to fight back. Morrison's ship had no visible weapons, Zeke Theory explained as the display continued. But humans, we learned, do not think about weapons the way other species do. They had modified their scientific equipment into crude but effective tools of war. The tribunal watched in amazement as the tiny human vessel used its mineral extraction lasers to slice through the armor of one Vulcan ship. Its sample collection pods had been converted into kinetic projectiles that struck with devastating accuracy. Most shocking of all, the ship's waste disposal system had been turned into a weapon that sprayed corrosive chemicals across the hull of another Vulcan vessel. Within 20 minutes, 2 of my escort ships were disabled, Zeke Theory said quietly. The third was retreating with heavy damage. A research vessel with a crew of 12 had defeated 3 Vulcan military ships with combined crews of over 300. The hull was completely silent now. Every alien present was trying to process what they had just seen. It challenged everything they thought they knew about space combat and technological development. But that was not the most disturbing part, the commander continued. During the entire battle, Captain Morrison kept talking to us. He was not boasting or making threats. He was teaching. He explained exactly what he was doing and why it worked. He told us that humans had been preparing for contact with hostile aliens for decades. Every human ship, he said, could be converted to military use within hours. Zeke Theory deactivated the holographic display and faced the tribunal directly. Morrison offered to let us go without further conflict. He said humans preferred peace but were prepared for war. I was too proud to accept his offer. I called for reinforcements and demanded he surrender. The alien commander's throat pouch began expanding and contracting again. Morrison sighed and said something that haunts me to this day. He said, "Commander, I was hoping we could be friends. Now I have to show you why that would have been better for everyone." The New Horizons had suddenly accelerated again, but this time towards the flagship. Every weapon on the massive Vulcan dreadnought fired at once, creating a wall of energy that should have vaporized any ship in known space. The human vessel flew straight through it. Their ship had some kind of shielding technology we had never encountered, Zeke Theory explained. But more than that, Morrison seemed to know exactly where our weapons would fire before we fired them. Later, we learned that humans had been studying galactic communication frequencies for years. They were reading our targeting computers in real time. The human ship had attached itself to the Vulcan flagship, like a parasite. Morrison's crew began cutting through the hull with surgical precision, targeting life support and engine systems, while carefully avoiding areas with crew members. Within an hour, my ship was helpless, the commander admitted. Morrison could have killed us all. Instead, he invited me aboard his vessel for what he called a conversation between professionals. Zeke's voice dropped to almost a whisper. I met Captain Morrison face to face in his ship's tiny conference room. He served me something called coffee and asked about Vulcan military doctrine. For 3 hours, we discussed tactics, strategy, and the nature of warfare. Morrison was not trying to intimidate me. He was genuinely curious about how other species fought. The alien commander looked around the tribunal hall, meeting the eyes of representatives from a dozen different worlds. At the end of our conversation, Morrison told me something that changed how I viewed the entire galaxy. He said that humans had identified over 200 ways to defeat Vulcan military technology using only equipment found on civilian ships. They had developed countermeasures for weapon systems they had never seen, based purely on mathematical probability and strategic analysis. Hi, Judge Mordick spoke into the silence that followed. Commander, are you saying that humanity had prepared for war with species they had never met? Yes, Zeke Theory replied. But more than that, Morrison explained that every human learns basic military tactics in school. Every human settlement has emergency protocols for converting to military production. Every human ship carries equipment that can be weaponized within hours. They do not have a military, honored judges. Their entire species is a military that pretends to be civilian. The implications of this statement sent another wave of murmurs through the hall. A species where every individual was a potential soldier was unprecedented in galactic history. Morrison released us after downloading our complete tactical database, Zeke Theory continued. He said humans wanted to understand how we thought about combat so they could develop better defenses. The silence in the tribunal hall stretched on as Commander Zeke Theory gathered himself for the next part of his testimony. His purple scales had returned to their normal color, but his forehand still trembled slightly as he activated another holographic display. This one showed the Saturn system, with its many moons orbiting the giant planet like jewels around a crown. 6 months after the incident with Captain Morrison, Zeke Theory began. The Vulcan High Command decided that humanity posed a threat to galactic stability. They ordered a full invasion of the Sol system. 500 ships, the largest armada in Vulcan history, would demonstrate our superiority and force human submission. High Judge Mordic shifted in his seat. 500 ships seems excessive for dealing with a single primitive world. That is what I thought at the time, Zektari replied. But the High Command had studied Morrison's tactical database. They knew humans were more dangerous than they appeared. Still, none of us truly understood what we were facing. The holographic display zoomed in on Titan, Saturn's largest moon. The image showed a complex of buildings and mining equipment scattered across the orange surface. It looked like any other industrial outpost, the kind found on resource moons throughout the galaxy. Our intelligence indicated that Titan Base was a simple mining operation, the commander continued. 300 civilian workers extracting hydrocarbons from the moon's atmosphere. The perfect target for a demonstration of Vulcan power. We would capture the base, take hostages, and force Earth to negotiate. Zeke Theory's throat pouch began its nervous expansion again. When our fleet arrived in the Saturn system, we received a transmission from the base commander, a human female named Lieutenant Colonel Amy Chen. She was small, even by human standards, with short black hair and calm eyes. She looked like an administrator, not a warrior. The display showed a recording of the transmission. Amy Chen sat in what appeared to be a simple office, with mining charts and production schedules visible on the walls behind her. She wore a plain blue uniform with minimal decorations. I commanded the assault personally, Zeke Theory said. I gave Chen the standard ultimatum: surrender immediately or face destruction. I expected fear, perhaps an attempt to negotiate. Instead, she smiled the same way Morrison had smiled during our first encounter. The alien commander paused, his large eyes reflecting the light from the hologram. Chen said something that should have warned me. She said, "Commander, I have been expecting you for months. My people are ready." The tribunal members leaned forward in their seats. They had heard about human unpredictability, but this was their first detailed account of human military thinking. I deployed 10,000 shock troops to the moon's surface, Zeke Theory continued. The largest ground assault in Vulcan history. Our dropships landed at strategic points around the base, following standard invasion doctrine. The plan was simple: surround the facility, overwhelm the defenders with superior numbers, and secure the hostages within hours. The holographic display began showing the invasion from multiple angles. Vulcan ships descended through Titan's thick atmosphere like metal rain. Thousands of armored warriors poured out of landing craft, their weapons ready for immediate combat. For the first hour, everything went according to plan, the commander said. Our forces secured the landing zones and began advancing on the base. Chun's people offered no resistance. We detected only minimal defensive positions. It seemed like the humans had given up without a fight. Zekteri's scales began darkening again as he reached the difficult part of his story. Then the ground began to explode. The display showed Vulcan troops suddenly disappearing into the surface of Titan. What had appeared to be solid ground was actually a network of hidden tunnels and chambers. Explosive charges detonated in carefully planned sequences, creating sinkholes that swallowed entire squads of warriors. Chen had spent months preparing for our arrival, the commander explained. She had used the mining equipment to hollow out the entire area around the base. Miles of tunnels connected hidden chambers filled with explosives, supplies, and defensive positions. In minutes, my 10,000 troops were scattered across an underground maze. High Judge Mordic spoke up. "Commander, surely your forces could have retreated and bombarded the moon from orbit. That was my first thought, Zeke Theory admitted, but Chen had prepared for that possibility as well. She had taken hostages from other human settlements and scattered them throughout the tunnel network. Any orbital bombardment would have killed innocent civilians along with her defenders. The alien commander's voice grew quieter as he continued. But that was not the worst part. Chen had only 200 people under her command, but she had turned them into something I had never encountered before. They were not just soldiers, they were the tunnels themselves. The holographic display showed the interior of the tunnel network. Vulcan warriors moved through narrow passages, their heavy armor scraping against the walls. They carried powerful weapons designed for open battlefields, but the confined spaces made them nearly useless. The humans would appear from ventilation shafts, fire a few shots, and vanish before we could respond, Zictheri explained. They moved through maintenance tunnels too small for Vulcan warriors to follow. They used the low gravity to leap between levels of the complex in ways that defied our understanding of ground combat. The display showed human defenders seeming to fly through the air, using the moon's weak gravity to move in 3 dimensions, while the Vulcan troops remained trapped on the tunnel floors. The humans wore simple environmental suits and carried lightweight weapons, but they fought with precision that made every shot count. Chan's people had studied our equipment and tactics for months, the commander continued. They knew exactly where our armor was weakest, how our weapons functioned, and how our warriors thought. Every ambush was perfectly planned. Every trap was designed specifically to defeat Vulcan military doctrine. The siege dragged on for weeks. Zictheri's forces controlled the surface of Titan, but the humans owned everything below ground. Supply lines were constantly attacked. Equipment was sabotaged. Warriors would disappear into the tunnels and never be seen again. The humans fought like no species I had ever encountered, Zictheri said. They did not seek glorious battle or individual combat. They worked together like parts of a single organism. When one group was discovered, another would create a distraction. When supplies ran low, they would capture our equipment and modify it for their own use. The alien commander activated another section of the display. This one showed human defenders using captured Vulcan weapons, but the weapons had been modified in ways that made them more effective in the confined spaces of the tunnel network. Chen herself was the most dangerous opponent I have ever faced, Zictheri admitted. She did not fight with weapons. She fought with the entire moon. She would trigger avalanches to block our advance, flood tunnels with poisonous gases from the atmospheric processes, and use the mining equipment to create new passages that bypassed our defensive positions. The siege continued for months. Zictheri's forces were slowly worn down by constant harassment and the psychological pressure of fighting an enemy that could strike from anywhere and disappear without a trace. The Vulcan commander began to understand that he was not fighting a traditional military force. He was fighting the moon itself, guided by human intelligence. The breaking point came during the 6th month of the siege, Zictheri said, his voice barely above a whisper. My forces had finally located Chun's command center deep within the tunnel network. I led a personal assault with my best warriors, determined to end the siege by capturing the human commander. The holographic display showed armored Vulcan soldiers moving through a large chamber filled with computer equipment and communication devices. At the center sat Amy Chen, alone and apparently defenseless. Chen was waiting for us, the commander continued. She sat at her desk, working on reports as if nothing unusual was happening. When I demanded her surrender, she looked up and smiled. She said, Commander, I have been looking forward to meeting you in person. Zictheri's scales turned almost black as he remembered the encounter. Chen explained that she had allowed us to reach her command center. The entire 6-month siege had been a test of our capabilities and tactics. She had been studying how Vulcan forces responded to different types of warfare, documenting our weaknesses for future reference. The alien commander's 4 hands clenched into fists. Then Chen told me something that revealed the true horror of what we were facing. She said that similar preparations were being made on every human world, every colony, every space station. Every settlement was being converted into a fortress designed specifically to defeat whatever enemy they might encounter. The display showed Amy Chen activating a device on her desk. Warning lights began flashing throughout the chamber as she spoke into a communication device. Chun's final message was broadcast to every human settlement in the galaxy. Zeke said she told them that the Velkin invasion tactics had been fully analyzed and that countermeasures were being transmitted immediately. Then she said something that still gives me nightmares. Commander Zeke Dari stood motionless for several minutes after finishing his account of Titan Base. The tribunal members waited patiently, understanding that the Velkin warrior was struggling with memories that clearly caused him great pain. When he finally spoke again, his voice was barely above a whisper. After the disaster at Titan, the Velkin High Command realized we were facing an enemy unlike any we had encountered before. He began, "The loss of 3,000 warriors to 200 humans was unacceptable. Our military doctrine, perfected over centuries of conquest, seemed useless against human tactics." The holographic display shifted to show the red planet Mars with its polar ice caps and scattered domed cities. The planet looked peaceful from orbit, with no obvious military installations or defensive systems visible on the surface. Mars was our next target, Zeke Theory continued. Intelligence reports indicated it was a scientific colony with minimal military presence. The population was mostly researchers, engineers, and support staff. After the humiliation at Titan, the High Command wanted an easy victory to restore Velkin pride. High Judge Mordic leaned forward in his chair. But the Mars operation did not go as planned either. Zeke Theria's throat pouch expanded twice before he could answer. "No, honored judge. Mars became the site of our greatest defeat, and the place where I finally understood the true nature of human warfare." The display zoomed in to show the largest Martian city, New Phoenix. The domed settlement housed nearly 50,000 humans and served as the planet's administrative center. Research facilities, manufacturing plants, and residential areas were clearly visible through the transparent dome. The assault on Mars began with a standard orbital bombardment, the commander explained. "We targeted military installations, communication centers, and power plants. Our goal was to disable the colony's ability to coordinate resistance, then land troops to secure the population." The holographic recording showed Velkin warships firing precisely targeted energy beams at the Martian surface. Explosions bloomed across the planet as key installations were destroyed. Within hours, the human colonies appeared to be completely cut off from each other and from Earth. "The bombardment was successful," Zeke Theory said. "All major military targets were eliminated. Communications were down across the entire planet. The human colonies were isolated and helpless. We prepared for a simple occupation operation." The alien commander's scales began to darken as he reached the difficult part of his story. But the humans had prepared for this possibility as well. As our troops landed, we encountered a single human who identified herself as Dr. Lisa Park, the planet's chief xenobiologist. The display showed a woman in her 40s with short brown hair and intelligent eyes. She wore a simple lab coat over civilian clothes and carried no visible weapons. She appeared completely harmless, like any other scientist the Velkins had encountered on dozens of worlds. Dr. Park approached our landing site under a flag of truce. Zeke Theory continued. "She requested a meeting with me to discuss terms of surrender. This was standard procedure for most species, so I agreed. I expected her to offer the colony's submission in exchange for protecting the civilian population." The commander paused, his large eyes reflecting the holographic light. Instead, Dr. Park began asking questions about Velkin biology and technology. She was particularly interested in our neural implants and the electromagnetic frequencies we used for communication and coordination. The neural implants were a source of great pride for the Velkin species. The devices allowed instant communication between warriors, perfect coordination of tactics, and enhanced reaction times in combat. They were considered the foundation of Velkin military superiority. "I saw no harm in answering her questions," Zektari admitted. "She claimed to be studying alien biology for peaceful purposes. Many species had similar research programs. I even allowed her to scan some of our equipment with her scientific instruments." The holographic display showed Dr. Park using various scanning devices to examine Velkin weapons and armor. She appeared to be conducting routine scientific observations, the kind of work that researchers throughout the galaxy performed when encountering new species. For 3 days, Dr. Park continued her research. The commander said she was granted access to our temporary base and interviewed dozens of my warriors. She seemed genuinely fascinated by our technology and military organization. I began to think that humans might be more reasonable than their actions at Titan had suggested. Zeke Theory's voice grew quieter as he continued. On the fourth day, Dr. Park thanked me for my cooperation and returned to New Phoenix. She said she had learned everything she needed to know and would be preparing her colony's formal surrender. I believed her. The display showed Dr. Park walking calmly back toward the domed city, carrying her scientific equipment and data recordings. She looked like a typical researcher who had completed a successful field study. 6 hours later, every Vulcan warrior on Mars simultaneously collapsed. Zeke Theory said, his scales now completely black with remembered horror. Our neural implants failed all at once. The electromagnetic frequencies that coordinated our thoughts and movements were suddenly disrupted by some kind of planetary interference. The tribunal members sat in stunned silence as the implications became clear. The humans had not been preparing to surrender. They had been preparing to attack, using information gathered through seemingly innocent scientific research. Dr. Park had discovered that our neural implants operated on a very specific frequency range, the commander explained. She had also learned that all Vulcan warriors were connected to the same network, sharing information and coordination signals through our implants. The holographic display showed the interior of New Phoenix, where Dr. Park worked frantically at a massive computer terminal. Around her, human technicians operated complex equipment that had been hastily assembled from various scientific instruments. Park had convinced the Mars colonial government to sacrifice their entire communication network. Zeke Theory continued. Every satellite, every radio transmitter, every piece of electronic equipment on the planet was converted into a single, massive electromagnetic pulse generator designed specifically to disrupt Vulcan neural implants. The scale of the sacrifice was staggering. The humans had deliberately destroyed their own ability to communicate in order to create a weapon that might work against their enemies. It was a level of strategic thinking that went far beyond normal military planning. The pulse had to be activated manually from the planet's core, the commander said. The electromagnetic interference would be so intense that no electronic equipment could function during the transmission. Someone had to go down to the planet's center and trigger the device by hand, knowing they would die in the process. The display showed Dr. Park descending into the depths of Mars through a series of mining tunnels and research shafts. She carried only basic equipment and a simple communication device for her final transmission. Park's last message was broadcast to the entire galaxy, Zeke Theory said, his voice breaking slightly. She explained exactly what she had done and how other species could defend themselves against Vulcan neural implant technology. She shared the specific frequencies, the power requirements, and the technical details needed to build similar weapons. The alien commander's forehands trembled as he remembered the transmission. But that was not the most terrifying part. Park also revealed that humans had been preparing similar defenses against every known species in the galaxy. They had studied the biology and technology of dozens of different aliens and developed countermeasures for each one. The implications were staggering. Humanity had been systematically preparing for war against enemies they had never fought, using purely theoretical knowledge and scientific analysis. As the electromagnetic pulse activated, Park made one final statement. Zeke Theory continued. She said, "This is Dr. Lisa Park, Mars Colony. We have successfully tested the Vulcan Neural Disruption Protocol. The information is now being transmitted to all human settlements. Remember, every species has weaknesses. We just have to be smart enough to find them." The pulse that followed was visible from orbit as a brilliant flash of electromagnetic energy that erupted from the planet's core. Every piece of electronic equipment on Mars was instantly destroyed, but the effect on the Vulcan warriors was far worse. Losing our neural implants was like losing part of our minds, Zeke Theory explained. We could no longer coordinate our movements or communicate with each other effectively. Our weapons became useless because they required neural interface to operate properly. In seconds, we were reduced from a coordinated military force to a collection of confused individuals. The human colonists had been prepared for this moment, while the Vulcan warriors struggled with their disabled implants. Human defenders emerged from hidden positions throughout the planet. They carried simple weapons that did not rely on electronic systems and moved with perfect coordination despite having no communication equipment. The humans had practiced fighting without electronic support, the commander said. They used hand signals, predetermined tactics, and simple mechanical weapons. The holographic display in the tribunal hall flickered and changed to show the blue marble of Earth hanging in the darkness of space. Commander Zeke stared at the image for a long moment, his purple scales shifting through different shades as emotions played across his alien features. When he finally spoke, his voice carried a weight that made every being in the hall lean forward to listen. After the disasters at Titan and Mars, the Vulcan High Command faced a choice that no military leader should ever have to make. He began, "We could retreat and admit defeat to a species we had thought primitive. Or we could commit everything to one final assault on their home world." High Judge Mordic watched the commander carefully. "And you chose to attack Earth directly?" "Pride," Zeke said simply. "Vulcan pride demanded that we prove our superiority." The High Command convinced themselves that Earth would be different. It was the human homeworld, heavily populated with civilians. Surely they would surrender rather than see their planet destroyed. The display showed the remaining Vulcan fleet, now reduced to barely 200 ships from the original 500. The vessels moved through space in perfect formation, but their battle scars were visible even from a distance. This was no longer the mighty armada that had begun the invasion. It was the desperate remnant of a broken military force. "I commanded the assault personally," Zeke continued. "My orders were simple. Demonstrate overwhelming force, demand surrender, and occupy the major population centers." The High Command believed that taking hostages would force the human government to negotiate. The alien commander's throat pouch began its familiar nervous movement. "As we approached Earth, I expected to face their military forces, warships, orbital platforms, professional soldiers defending their home. Instead, we received a transmission that changed everything I thought I knew about warfare." The holographic display showed a human male in his 60s with gray hair and calm eyes. He wore a simple military uniform with no decorations except a single star on his collar. Behind him, the image showed what appeared to be a command center filled with people of all ages working at computer terminals. The man identified himself as General Bobby Martinez, Earth Defense Coordinator. Zeke said he looked like any other military officer I had encountered, but something in his voice told me this would not be a normal military engagement. The recording of Martinez's transmission began to play. His voice was steady and professional as he spoke. "Commander Zeke, I am General Bobby Martinez. I have been expecting your arrival for several months. On behalf of the people of Earth, I want you to know that we are prepared for what comes next." Zeke's scales darkened as he remembered the conversation. "I gave Martinez the standard ultimatum. Surrender immediately or face orbital bombardment. I expected fear, anger, or attempts to negotiate. Instead, he smiled and said something that should have made me turn around and leave the system immediately." The alien commander paused, his large eyes reflecting the holographic light. Martinez said, "Commander, you have made a fundamental error in your understanding of human civilization. You think you are about to fight our military. In reality, you are about to fight our entire species." The implications of this statement were lost on Zeke at the time. But the tribunal members were beginning to understand. The humans were not operating under normal military doctrine, where civilians were protected and soldiers did the fighting. As our forces descended toward Earth's surface, I began to understand what Martinez meant. The commander continued, "Every major city on the planet had been converted into a fortress. Every civilian had been given military training. Every child old enough to hold a weapon was part of the planetary defense force." The holographic display showed scenes from across Earth's surface. In New York, elderly humans operated anti-aircraft weapons from rooftops. In Tokyo, children as young as 10 ran supply lines between defensive positions. In London, entire families worked together to maintain communication networks and coordinate resistance activities. This was not conscription or forced military service, Zeke explained. The humans had voluntarily transformed their entire civilization into a single military unit. Parents taught their children to fight. Grandparents shared knowledge of guerrilla tactics, Scientists developed weapons in their laboratories, while artists created propaganda to maintain morale. The alien commander's voice grew quieter as he described what he had witnessed. In the city of Chicago, I watched a human family coordinate the defense of their neighborhood. The father, Don Fisher, operated a heavy weapon from their apartment. Bill and his wife Carol managed communications with other defensive positions. Their twin daughters, who could not have been more than 12 years old, ran ammunition and medical supplies between different fighting positions. The tribunal members sat in horrified silence as they tried to process what they were hearing. A species that used children as soldiers was unprecedented in galactic civilization, but the humans seemed to view it as natural family cooperation. The Fisher family fought together for 6 hours against my best troops, Zeke Theory continued. When their position was finally surrounded and their ammunition exhausted, they made a choice that broke something inside me. Rather than surrender, they activated explosives that destroyed their entire building, taking 30 Vulcan warriors with them. The alien commander's 4 hands trembled as he remembered the scene. As the building collapsed, the Fisher family was singing an old Earth song about their planet and their people. They died together, still singing, still fighting, still believing that their sacrifice would help other humans survive. Hi, Judge Mordick spoke into the heavy silence. Commander, are you saying that human civilians willingly died rather than surrender? Not just willingly, Zeke Theory replied, eagerly. They competed with each other to see who could inflict the most damage on our forces. Parents would sacrifice themselves to save ammunition for their children. Children would risk their lives to gather intelligence about our movements. Elderly humans would volunteer for suicide missions to destroy our equipment. The holographic display showed similar scenes from across the planet. In every city, town, and settlement, human families fought together with a coordination that defied military understanding. There were no front lines, no rear areas, no safe zones. Every human was a potential threat. Every building a potential fortress. Every family a potential military unit. General Martinez had spent years preparing for this moment, the commander explained. He had studied every invasion in galactic history and learned from each one. He understood that traditional military forces could be defeated, but an entire civilization fighting for survival was nearly impossible to overcome. The display zoomed in to show Martinez himself, now wearing combat gear and carrying a rifle. At 65 years old, he was personally leading defensive operations in Washington, D.C., coordinating global resistance while fighting street-to-street battles against Vulcan forces. Martinez had turned every human settlement into what he called a learning laboratory, Zictari said. Each battle was not just about defeating our forces, but about gathering information on our tactics, equipment, and psychology. The data was immediately shared with every other human settlement through hidden communication networks. The alien commander's voice broke slightly as he continued. I realized that we were not fighting a war of conquest. We were fighting a war of extinction. The humans had made it clear that they would rather die as a species than submit to foreign rule. The battle for Earth raged for weeks, but it was unlike any military campaign in galactic history. The Vulcan forces found themselves fighting not an army, but an entire planet that had become a single, unified organism dedicated to their destruction. Every human we killed was immediately replaced by 2 more, Zictari explained. Every position we captured was retaken within hours. Every piece of equipment we destroyed was replaced by human-built alternatives within days. They were not just fighting us. They were learning from us, adapting to us, and becoming more dangerous. With each encounter, the most horrifying aspect of the Earth assault was the human ability to coordinate. Without traditional military communication, families used simple hand signals. Children ran messages between positions, and elderly humans maintained morale through songs and stories that kept the entire population fighting with perfect unity. I watched a human grandmother teach a group of children how to disable Vulcan armor using kitchen knives. The commander said, his scales now completely black with remembered horror. She explained the weak points in our equipment while helping them practice the movements they would need to kill my warriors. The display showed the grandmother, a woman in her 70s with gray hair and gentle eyes, calmly demonstrating combat techniques to a group of children. She treated the lesson like a cooking class. patiently correcting their technique and encouraging them to practice until they could perform the movements perfectly. The children listened carefully and asked intelligent questions about Velkin. Anatomy and armor design, Zeke continued. They were not afraid. They were not angry. They were simply learning how to kill more effectively. Commander Zeke stood in the center of the tribunal hall, his purple scales now a pale gray color that indicated extreme emotional exhaustion. The assembled alien representatives waited in complete silence as he prepared to deliver the final part of his testimony. The weight of what they had already heard hung heavy in the air, like a physical presence. The war ended not with a great battle or a decisive victory, Zeke began, his voice barely above a whisper. It ended with a conversation that revealed the true nature of humanity and changed my understanding of intelligence itself. The holographic display showed the remnants of the once mighty Velkin fleet. Less than 50 ships remained from the original 500, and most of those were damaged beyond full repair. The proud armada that had set out to conquer a primitive species was now a broken collection of survivors limping through space. After 6 weeks of fighting on Earth, I received an unexpected transmission. The commander continued. Not from General Martinez or any other military leader, but from a human I had never encountered before. He identified himself as Captain Rick Thompson, commander of the human space fleet. The display showed a man in his 40s with short brown hair and tired eyes. Unlike the other humans Zeke had encountered, Thompson wore no military decorations or symbols of rank. He looked like an ordinary person who had been given extraordinary responsibilities. Captain Thompson requested a private meeting, Zeke said. He offered safe passage to a neutral location where we could discuss what he called the future relationship between our species. I was suspicious, but my fleet was in no condition to continue fighting. I agreed to the meeting. The alien commander's throat pouch expanded nervously as he remembered the encounter. Thompson met me aboard a small human ship at the edge of the Sol system. The vessel was unarmed and carried only a skeleton crew. It was the kind of ship used for peaceful exploration, not military operations. The meeting took place in a simple conference room with basic furniture and no obvious security measures. Thompson served Zeke something called coffee and began what seemed like a casual conversation about military tactics and strategy. For 2 hours, Thompson and I discussed the war from a professional perspective, the commander explained. He asked detailed questions about Velkin military doctrine, our equipment, and our strategic thinking. I assumed he was gathering intelligence for future conflicts. Hi, Judge Mordick leaned forward in his chair, but that was not his purpose. Zeke's scales darkened slightly. No, honored Judge. Thompson was conducting what humans call a debriefing session. He was evaluating the effectiveness of human defensive strategies and identifying areas for improvement. The implications of this statement sent a murmur through the tribunal hall. The humans had been treating the entire war as a test of their own capabilities rather than a desperate struggle for survival. Thompson explained that the human response to our invasion had been carefully planned for decades. The commander continued. Every aspect of their defense, from Morrison's first encounter to the civilian resistance on Earth, had been part of a comprehensive strategy designed to evaluate and improve human military capabilities. The holographic display showed charts and graphs that Thompson had shared during their meeting. The data covered everything from weapon effectiveness to psychological impact, casualty ratios to resource consumption. It was the kind of detailed analysis that military academies used to study historical conflicts. But the most shocking revelation came when Thompson showed me the real scope of human preparation, Zeke said, his voice growing even quieter. The defensive strategies we had encountered were not their primary military planning. They were training exercises. The alien commander's hands trembled as he continued. Thompson revealed that Earth had been preparing for galactic contact since their species first developed space travel. They had built hidden colonies throughout their solar system and beyond. They had developed technologies that we never encountered during the invasion. Most importantly, they had been ready to evacuate their entire species if necessary. The tribunal members sat in stunned silence as they processed this information. The humans had been prepared to abandon their home world entirely rather than submit to conquest. The colonies we attacked represented less than 10% of human population, Zeke Derry explained. The other 90% was scattered across hidden settlements that we never detected. While we were fighting on Earth, human engineers were building new ships, developing new weapons, and preparing for a prolonged conflict that could last for generations. Thompson had shared this information not to intimidate the Vulcan commander, but to explain why continued warfare would be futile. The humans had planned for every possible scenario, including the complete destruction of their home world and the need to rebuild their civilization from scattered survivors. Captain Thompson told me something that still gives me nightmares, the commander continued. He said that if we had succeeded in conquering Earth, human survivors would have spent the next 1,000 years studying our species and developing ways to reclaim their world. They would have treated conquest not as defeat, but as a temporary setback in a conflict that would continue until either humanity was extinct or their enemies were defeated. The alien commander paused, his entire body shaking with the memory. Then Thompson revealed the most terrifying aspect of human strategic thinking. He said that the entire war had been designed to teach humanity how to fight galactic-level conflicts. Every encounter, every battle, every sacrifice had been planned to gather information about space warfare and alien military capabilities. The holographic displays showed detailed files on dozens of alien species, including comprehensive analyses of their military capabilities, technological weaknesses, and psychological profiles. The humans had been preparing for potential conflicts with enemies they had never met, based purely on observational data and strategic analysis. Thompson explained that human military planning operated on what he called species survival timescales. Zeke Ferry said, while other species planned for individual conflicts or even individual lifetimes, humans planned for scenarios that might not occur for hundreds or thousands of years. The revelation that followed was the most shocking of all. Thompson told Zekthori that the humans had identified potential threats throughout the galaxy and had been developing countermeasures for each one. They had studied every known species, analyzed their strengths and weaknesses, and created detailed plans for defending against possible future aggression. But Thompson also revealed something that changed my entire understanding of human nature, the commander continued. Despite all their military preparation and strategic planning, humans genuinely preferred peace and cooperation. The defensive capabilities we had encountered were not intended for conquest or expansion. They were designed purely to protect human civilization from extinction. Captain Thompson made an offer that no Vulcan leader could have imagined. Instead of demanding reparations or territory, he requested cultural and technological exchange. The humans wanted to learn about Vulcan society, art, and philosophy. In return, they offered to share their defensive technologies with any species that approached them in peace. Thompson explained that humanity's ultimate goal was not military dominance, but species diversity, Zeke Ferry said. They believed that a galaxy with many different cultures and perspectives was stronger and more interesting than one dominated by a single species. The alien commander's scales slowly returned to their normal purple color as he reached the conclusion of his testimony. Captain Thompson offered me a choice that no enemy had ever offered before. He said that Vulcan warriors could return home with honor, or they could remain and help humanity develop better defensive strategies for protecting all galactic civilizations. The offer revealed the true nature of human strategic thinking. They viewed former enemies not as conquered foes, but as potential sources of knowledge and allies in future conflicts. Many of my warriors chose to remain and work with human military planners, Zeke Ferry admitted. They found that humans were genuinely interested in learning about Vulcan combat techniques and tactical thinking, not for aggressive purposes, but to better understand how different species approached conflict resolution. The tribunal sat in amazed silence as they realized the implications of what they were hearing. The humans had transformed a war of conquest into an educational exchange program. Thompson's final revelation was the most profound, the commander concluded. He told me that humanity had been observing galactic civilization for decades through hidden monitoring stations and disguised research vessels. They had been preparing for contact, not just with individual species, but with the entire galactic community. The humans had developed plans for peaceful integration with galactic society, but they had also prepared for the possibility that the galaxy might be hostile to newcomers. Their military capabilities were designed not just to protect Earth, but to defend any species that might be threatened by aggressive neighbors. Captain Thompson asked me to deliver a message to this tribunal, Zeke Theory said, his voice now strong and clear.